In October 1982, EPCOT Center opened as the most expensive privately funded construction project in American history. A permanent monument to human progress that Disney's own engineers designed to last 100 years. Today, more than half of it is gone. Not because it aged badly, because somebody decided it wasn't profitable enough to keep. There's a piece of footage from October 1982 that looks like it came from a different country. Spaceship Earth rising against a Florida sky. Pavilions built not to sell you something, but to make you believe in something. That understanding the past could help humanity build a better future. That park still exists. Walk through it today, though, and you'll find a Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster where an energy pavilion used to stand, and Frozen characters greeting guests in what's supposed to be Norway. Disney's official explanation is simple. The future caught up with EPCOT. The technology aged. The educational model couldn't compete anymore. That explanation isn't quite true. What happened to EPCOT is a story about money, sponsors, and a leaked internal plan that most people have never heard of. And once you see how deliberate it was, you'll never look at Future World the same way again. To understand why EPCOT was destroyed, you first need to understand why it was built the way it was. When Disneyland opened in 1955, its Tomorrowland was cheap and specific. The Monsanto house of the future showed off plastic furniture. Rocket to the Moon promised space tourism was right around the corner. Within a decade, all of it looked ridiculous. The real world had moved faster than the rides could keep up. By 1967, Tomorrowland was a punchline. The Imagineers who designed EPCOT in the late 1970s built their entire philosophy around not repeating that mistake. Instead of predicting a specific future, they built attractions around the history of human progress. Communication, transportation, energy, imagination. Categories so broad they could never really go out of date. Spaceship Earth walked guests through the history of communication, from cave paintings to the printing press to the telegraph. And only in its final scene touched on anything contemporary. World of Motion spent 14 minutes on the history of transportation and gave modern cars about 3 of them. Horizons, one of the most ambitious dark rides Disney ever built, opened by showing guests the failed futurist predictions of the past. Then let them choose between 3 possible futures at the end. Space colonies, ocean cities, desert farming. Not a prediction. A set of possibilities. Internal Imagineering philosophy from the era reportedly called for attractions to spend 60 to 70% of their runtime on historical or scientific grounding, with only a small slice devoted to anything that could feel dated in 10 years. It worked. Through the 1980s and into the mid-1990s, EPCOT's Future World attraction stayed popular and critically respected. Guest surveys repeatedly ranked Horizons and Journey into Imagination among the best things Disney had ever built. So if the whole point of the design was to avoid aging out, what actually killed it? Here's where the story gets complicated. EPCOT was, at the time, the most expensive privately funded construction project in American history. Well over $1 billion. Disney didn't have that kind of capital sitting around, so they built the park on an unprecedented sponsorship model. Corporations paid Disney tens of millions of dollars up front, plus annual fees, for 10 to 15-year contracts. In exchange, they funded entire pavilions, construction, staffing, maintenance, everything. General Electric built Horizons. General Motors built World of Motion. Kodak built Journey into Imagination. Disney got a world-class park it never had to fully pay for. For a decade, it worked beautifully. Then the contracts started running out. General Electric declined to renew Horizons in 1993 during the Jack Welch era of GE. A period defined by aggressive cost-cutting and a relentless focus on shareholder returns that saw the company shed anything considered non-core. Theme park sponsorships included. Kraft walked away from the land the same year. United Technologies left the Living Seas in 1998. One by one, the companies that had built EPCOT decided it no longer justified the expense. Disney had options here. They could have funded the pavilions themselves. They could have found new sponsors who actually wanted to be associated with education and science. Instead, they used almost every departure as an opportunity to convert something educational into something that cost less to run and sold more merchandise. When General Motors' World of Motion contract expired in 1996, Disney didn't look for a replacement sponsor. They pitched GM on funding something completely different, a car-testing thrill ride. GM paid for it. World of Motion's 140 animatronics and its entire 14-minute journey through transportation history were torn out. Test Track opened in 1999 as a speed simulator, no history lesson attached. The journey into imagination story is messier and honestly a little suspicious. Through the 1990s, the ride consistently ranked as a guest favorite. There was no maintenance crisis, no technical failure forcing Disney's hand. Kodak kept renewing. Then in 1998, Disney announced the ride would close for enhancements. What came back in 1999 gutted it. Dreamfinder removed entirely. Figment reduced to a cameo. Runtime cut nearly in half. And Kodak products shoved to the front of nearly every scene. Guests hated it, loudly and immediately. And Disney pulled the ride again in 2001, just 2 years after reopening, making it one of the shortest-lived major renovations in the company's history. A partial fix in 2002 brought Figment back, but never restored what was lost. Kodak ended its sponsorship for good in 2010. Nobody has ever proven Disney deliberately sabotaged the ride to make Kodak look bad and justify killing the concept. But the theory has circulated among Disney historians for years. And whatever the intent, the outcome served Disney's interests perfectly. A failed pavilion, an embarrassed sponsor, and a clean excuse to move away from education-first design. Horizons met a similar fate without any sabotage required. When GE left, Disney ran the pavilion sponsor-free for 5 years, proving they could do it. Then, in January 1999, they closed it anyway. No engineering report or safety concern was ever published to justify the closure. It was demolished in 2000 and replaced by Mission Space, a centrifuge ride with essentially no historical or scientific storytelling, mostly remembered today for making guests physically sick. Here's the detail almost nobody outside serious Disney fan circles knows about. In the early 2000s, Walt Disney Imagineering drew up an internal plan to do something even bigger than these piecemeal conversions. A wholesale reinvention of the entire front half of EPCOT. In February 2003, Disney insider Jim Hill broke the story, reporting that Imagineering had drafted concept plans, internally called Project Gemini, that would have renamed Future World Discovery Land, repainted Spaceship Earth gold, and gutted its interior for a Microsoft-sponsored thrill ride called Time Racers. The Living Seas would become Triton's Kingdom, a Little Mermaid-themed pavilion. The land would get a forest canopy roller coaster. According to Hill's reporting, sourced from leaked internal concept art and planning documents, the whole thing was projected to cost somewhere between $350 and $500 million, with a target completion around 2006. It never happened, at least not in that form. The plan stalled largely because of budget pressure. Disney was navigating a post-9/11 economic downturn and had already sunk money into overhauling the underperforming Disney California Adventure. Then CEO Michael Eisner, already under pressure from investors to keep costs down, appears to have never fully greenlit the expensive version of the plan. His departure from the company in 2005 closed the door further on any large-scale revival of it. Spaceship Earth kept its dome. Time Racers was never built. But here's the thing. The underlying philosophy behind Project Gemini didn't die with the plan. It quietly became the direction Disney kept moving in anyway. One pavilion at a time for the next 2 decades. Test track and mission. Space had already proven Future World could support pure thrill rides with no educational content. The Seas got a Finding Nemo overlay in 2007. Proving intellectual property could be layered onto an existing pavilion without a guest revolt. Norway's Maelstrom, a ride about Scandinavian folklore and history, became Frozen Ever After in 2016. The first time a franchise fully replaced cultural content in World Showcase. Universe of Energy, a pavilion built around the physics of energy formation, was demolished in 2017 for Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. Each step got measured by attendance bumps and merchandise sales, and each success made the next conversion easier to justify. The financial logic makes sense on a spreadsheet. Educational attractions need expert consultants, complex animatronics, specialized upkeep. Intellectual property rides use licensed characters, simpler screen-based technology, and sell plush toys on the way out. An attraction about renewable energy doesn't move merchandise. A Guardians of the Galaxy coaster does, by design. What the spreadsheets missed is that EPCOT's strangeness was the whole point. It was the only major theme park in the world built around actual science communication wrapped in world-class entertainment. And that differentiation was worth more than any single ride's box office. From 2000 to 2019, EPCOT's attendance grew 17%. Magic Kingdom grew 36%. Animal Kingdom grew 56%. Making EPCOT act more like Disney's other parks didn't grow its audience. It just erased the one thing that made people choose it over the others. There's an irony sitting underneath all of this. The original EPCOT attractions were built around principles that don't expire. The history of communication doesn't get old. The physics of energy doesn't change. Human creativity isn't a fad. The intellectual property that replaced them runs on the opposite clock. The Nemo film that inspired the Seas overlay came out in 2003. Its cultural relevance had already faded by the time the ride opened in 2007. Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind opened in 2022, right after Marvel had already announced Volume 3 as the trilogy's final film. When the next wave of superhero fatigue sets in, or the next animated hit eclipses Frozen, does Disney tear the pavilion out and start over? That's the trap the original 1982 design was built specifically to avoid. And it's exactly the trap Disney walked back into. Spaceship Earth's geodesic dome was engineered to physically stand for 100 years. The vision behind it was meant to last even longer than that. A place built to inspire kids who'd grow up and bring their own kids back to be inspired the same way. Instead, EPCOT became something closer to a case study in how American institutions quietly hollow themselves out, trading what made them different for whatever pays off this quarter, then acting surprised when nobody needs them anymore. So was this obsolescence, or was it a choice? Because the evidence says choice every time. Let me know in the comments if you remember Riding Horizons or the original Journey into Imagination. And if you were as blindsided by the 1999 version as most guests were. See you in the next one.